Have you ever watched one of those massive Hollywood disaster movies and just thought, man, I wish I could make something like that? You know, that epic, city-destroying, world-ending kind of scale? Well, what if I told you that the biggest barrier, all the millions of dollars and huge film crews, is actually starting to just disappear? Today, we're going to dive into how AI is letting a single person, a solo creator, produce a legit blockbuster movie right from their own desk. Let's get into it.
And that's really the promise, isn't it? This line comes from a filmmaker who's right in the middle of all this new tech. It's a huge statement, kind of inspired by guys like Roland Emmerich, the master of disaster himself. It just perfectly captures the wild ambition that AI is suddenly making possible for pretty much anyone.
And yeah, that is the big question. It sounds completely impossible, right? How do you possibly close that giant gap between one person with a cool idea and the massive machine of a Hollywood studio? Well, the answer isn't about getting a bigger budget. It's about getting a whole new kind of studio. Look, for so many filmmakers just starting out, the dream is to go big. We're talking tsunamis wiping out cities, giant spaceships in orbit, the kind of stuff that just makes an audience's jaw hit the floor. But that dream has always been crushed by the hard reality of money, equipment, and just needing a whole army of people.
So, we've got to stop thinking the old way. The solution that's popping up isn't just a cheaper camera or better editing software. No, the real game changer is a completely new tool, one that basically puts an entire professional film studio right at your fingertips.
And that tool is called Higgsfield AI. We're going to look at one feature in particular, called the Cinema Studio. And you should think of it less like an app and more like a virtual film set, fully loaded with all the crazy expensive gear you could ever dream of.
Okay, check this out. This is where it gets really nuts. This isn't just some generic make a video button. You get to choose your exact camera, like the Arri Alexa, which has been used on tons of Hollywood movies. You can pick anamorphic lenses to get that epic widescreen blockbuster look, with the cinematic black bars. You can even control your focal length and your aperture to decide if you want that super creamy blurry background or if you want everything to be razor sharp. You're not just a user anymore, you're basically a virtual cinematographer.
Right, so having the tools is awesome, but how do you actually use them to make a shot that feels real and cinematic? Let's break down the creative workflow people are using because it's actually surprisingly smart and efficient.
It all comes down to these 3 simple steps. First, you nail down the visual style, the whole mood and color palette of your film. Then, and this is super important, you generate a still image. It's way faster and cheaper to get a single perfect frame before you tell the AI to generate a whole video. And then, finally, once you've got that perfect shot, you bring it to life with animation.
And that first step is where we find this really clever trick called look hacking. So instead of trying to describe a vibe from scratch, which is super hard, you just grab a screenshot from a movie you love the look of, you feed it to an AI like ChatGPT, and just ask it to describe the cinematic style. It'll spit back this perfect text prompt with terms like cold blue teal color grading with muted yellows, and boom, you've just captured a professional color grade for your own project.
Now, this gets even crazier when you start animating. This is where the real magic happens. So say you want a camera move that would be insanely complex in real life, like floating from the driver's seat of a car all the way to the back seat in one smooth motion. All you have to do is generate 2 still images, one for your start frame and one for your end frame. You show both to the AI, and it generates the entire seamless camera move between them. That's a professional crane shot done in just a few minutes.
But it's not all perfect, of course. It can't be that easy, right? This is brand new tech, and when you work with it, you run into some really weird, really frustrating problems. The AI, it doesn't always listen.
I love how the filmmaker we're following puts it. He says, the AI fibs. It tells little lies. It takes shortcuts, makes bizarre choices, and sometimes it just hallucinates details that are not quite right. You have to constantly be watching for these little visual goofs that can totally ruin the illusion of your movie.
And these little fibs tend to fall into a few common buckets. You'll get weird visual artifacts, like a hand with 6 fingers. Your characters will just stand there like mannequins unless you specifically tell them to, blink. But the biggest, most annoying problem of all is character inconsistency. Your main character might have a short beard in one shot and then a full-on wizard beard when you cut back to him. It is the #1 thing you have to solve.
So, faced with this huge consistency problem, creators didn't just throw their hands up. Nope. They came up with a really clever workaround, a super simple but incredibly effective trick to force the AI to remember what a person actually looks like.
and they call it a character set card. It's basically exactly what it sounds like. It's a single reference image that shows your main character from the front, the side, and the back, kind of like a model sheet that an animator would use. And by including this set card with every single prompt you write, you're giving the AI a constant, perfect reference for your character.
And using it is so simple, it's beautiful. First, you create your set card. Then, for every new scene you're making, you upload that card as a reference image. And finally, you just add a simple little instruction to your text prompt, something like, replace the person in the scene with the man from the reference card. With that one little trick, you solve like 90% of your character problems. It's a game changer.
So, when you put all this stuff together, the virtual studios, the smart workflows, the clever problem solving, you start to see the bigger picture. This isn't just a new toy. It's a fundamental change in who gets to tell stories on a massive scale.
This is basically the new formula. To make an epic movie, the main things you need aren't money and connections anymore. It's your own creativity and knowing how to use these AI tools. Seriously, the gates to the blockbuster kingdom are being thrown wide open.
But here's a really key point. The goal isn't for AI to replace everything. Not at all. The real power comes from mixing it all together. Using AI to generate an insane shot of a car driving through a destroyed city, and then cutting to a close-up of a real actor reacting inside a real car. That interplay, that blend of real footage with AI-generated shots, that's where the most amazing stuff happens.
And that brings us to our last and maybe most important point, which is this number, 6. As in 6 months. The filmmaker we've been following pointed out that the quality of the shots he can make today is just worlds beyond what was even possible 6 months ago. That's how insanely fast this is all moving. The stuff that seems impossible right now could literally be a standard feature by next year.
Which leaves us with this final kind of thrilling question. When all the technical barriers to making huge, epic movies are just gone, the only thing that's left is the idea, the story itself. So as these tools get into the hands of millions of new creators, the real question we should all be asking is, what is the next great story that's going to get told?